Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Our guest today will be Chip Fridrich. We will talk Commodore baseball. This episode sponsored by the Well Coffee House, which is a Nashville area coffee house that provides fresh roasted coffee along with its house-made pastries, breakfast, and lunch offerings. There are 5 locations to serve you in the Nashville area. Those are in Brentwood, Green Hills, downtown, Bellevue, and the Cool Springs Lifeway. More information can be found at wellcoffeehouse.org. The Well Coffee House, where coffee changes lives. We thank our co-sponsor, Wellspire, Nashville's Learning and Development Center, which is located in the Gulch. This podcast also sponsored by Vanderbilt fan Josh Minton, an independent insurance agent operating out of Brentwood. Looking for a one-stop shop to take care of your insurance needs? Josh has you covered. Call him today at 615-933-1979. Email him at josh@hqinsurance.com. Follow him on Twitter at Joshua Minton HQ. Or on Facebook at facebook.com/JD Minton HQ. He's my insurance agent. Give him a try. Tell him you heard about it here. Help the podcast out. You have nothing to lose. Give Josh a call. Get some quotes. See if he can improve your insurance situation. And there's a really good chance that he can. Today's news presented by Sutherland & Belk, a family-owned injury law firm. If you or a loved one has been hurt in any type of accident, call Taylor at Russell at 615-846-6200 to see what your rights are and if they can help. Vanderbilt takes its baseball series from Missouri 2-1. The Commodores remain atop the SEC overall standings by a game and end the weekend number 1 in the RPI. Our guest line today brought to you by Boll & Branch, founded by Vanderbilt graduates Scott and Missy Tannen, who finished at Vandy in '99. I have slept on Boll & Branch sheets for years. They are amazing. I had no clue how comfortable sheets could be till I got these. They are fair trade certified, which means they are made under safe conditions by men and women who are treated fairly and paid fairly. Try them for a month. You can return them for free, but you will not want to. When you have the sheets, try the mattress, which was voted Best Mattress of 2018. Go to bollandbranch.com. That is spelled BOLL. Enter the promo code VANDY to get $50 off your first set. Joining us now, Chip Fridrich, as we talk Vanderbilt baseball. Chip, a great weekend. Welcome to the show. Bottom line is not a lot changed. Vanderbilt sits in exactly the same place it sat coming into the weekend, which is not a bad thing.
You're right, Chris. It was a good week for Vanderbilt baseball. Kind of a workmanlike manner, going up to Louisville after a successful sweep in Columbia the previous week. And I mentioned on the podcast last week, I was glad that they were playing a quality team, something to look forward to, getting the barrel back to Nashville with Louisville having won the last couple of years. And they went up there and very methodically beat a Louisville team that, although Louisville lost 2 or 3 this weekend, it's still a very high-quality RPI team and a team that will be around at the end of the season. And then this weekend, they finally lost a game. And, you kind of saw some heads hanging a little bit, some Vanderbilt fans leaving the park on Saturday. But as I mentioned to several people as walking out of the gate, it might not be a bad thing. You never want to lose, but glad that they kind of got that out of their system. You don't want hanging on to a win streak like that can kind of be a little deflating. So good weekend, good week for Vanderbilt baseball as they just keep plowing through this thing and got themselves over the 41 mark at 41 wins. And that's impressive and still playing their best baseball, I think, continually getting better. And as we move towards the third season of as Tim Corbin calls it, you get the preseason, the regular season, and this third season of postseason play comes into play for this team.
Well, 2 things. First of all, Louisville did lose 2 or 3 this weekend to Virginia, which oddly enough, that gave Vanderbilt another top 50 RPI win as Virginia snuck in there. I don't know if Virginia's going to make the NCAA tournament, but it's at least got a fighting shot now. So Louisville helps Vanderbilt in 2 ways, by losing to Vanderbilt and by losing to Virginia twice. So there's that. Right. Second, I thought that I say nothing's changed. In terms of results, nothing's changed. Vanderbilt is still basically right where it was in terms of national seeding. It moved up a spot in the polls. It remained a game ahead in the SEC. But I thought that my issue with this team was I wasn't sure if it could win the types of games it won in 2011, 2013, 2014, 2015, those 4-2 type ball games, those things where can you hold another team down? Can you throw strikes in pressure spots? And for a team that had been beating teams 11-5 in those types of games a lot, you kind of wondered, could they do it in this type of game? And really, they did it 3 times out of 4 against 2 excellent pitching staffs. I think that's a really good sign heading into the postseason.
I agree with you. I mean, Missouri is not your old Missouri. I mean, Missouri's got a bunch of veteran players. They're sitting at 34-18-1 overall. They're going to make the tournament unless they just have something totally collapse this weekend, although they have the Gators coming into their home place this weekend. I mean, they're even 13-13-1 in the conference, and they got a nice little team. So it was a situation this weekend where for the first time they found themselves in the 6th or 7th inning being down, and I was kind of anxious to see how this team was going to fight through that. You know, this team is, you know, when you win 41 games and you only have 10 losses, stats can be a little misleading. And I heard Joe Fisher mention that Vanderbilt, after 6 innings, I think they were 3-6 when trailing after 6 innings this year. Well, when you only lost 10 games, that can be a little misleading. But, you know, this team has never had an opportunity, or they've had a few chances, but I was kind of hoping Saturday to see some, not that they didn't fight, but, we'll come back there to they can play in those games like you mentioned in your statement. So it's, they've been, methodically taking apart teams with big innings, and they've been responding when teams respond against them. And, Missouri, case in point this weekend, look at the box score, they continue that, that they've done in their win streak the last several weeks. When a team responds with a run or two, they always have in their half of the frame have responded. And that's a sign of a team that doesn't get rattled, and they continue to fight, and the pressure doesn't seem to get to them. You remember talking about all the seniors that are on this team, or at least redshirt juniors on this team, that've been around, they've been through the battles, and they know how to fight through, and nothing seems to faze them. So although Saturday didn't work out with a victory, trying to come back, I think this team is poised to make a run here and be battle tested when they do get down, because things aren't always going to be, big run innings when you have those comfortable leads. When you get into the tournament and you face a team that has a good, everybody's got a good pitcher. I mean, let's just face it. You're going to in these regionals, you find that even your 4 seeds have a guy. They all have a guy who can, because they wouldn't be there if they didn't. And that can be dangerous depending on who you get. For example, Navy. I mean, Navy's got a guy who's leading the country in strikeouts. Now, you stick a guy out there and he's leading, I think it's not close. I mean, it's the next closest, I think, is 20 strikeouts to the next pitcher. So you've got a guy who's going to Navy, unless they just fall flat on their face, is going to play a 1 seed somewhere. And that's going to be a tough out. Now they don't have the depth going down as far as pitchers 2, 3, and 4. So I think this team is battle tested. I think we'll see them respond, and didn't get the job done on Saturday. But like you said, it is important to see in these games remaining how they fight when adversity happens.
Missouri was better than I thought. They hit better than I thought. I think they've had some guys out. They fielded better than I thought. They made 2 terrific plays to take away probably RBI doubles for Julian Infante and Pat DeMarco. Say RBI, probably 4 or 5 runs saved with those 2 plays in the outfield. And they didn't have Tyler LaPlante, who's one of their better pitchers. I was talking to their media relations guy. They think they will get him back for Florida. I think they will sweep that series, and they may end up being a host because of that. Right now, they're 14 in the RPI. Sweeping Florida would not hurt them. In fact, it would probably bump them up a couple more notches because Florida's a good RPI team. I think that's going to end up being a really good series win, and one a little bit better than maybe we thought going into the weekend.
Right, and we did not see their best on Friday night. I mean, Candleberry, who threw 3 innings on Friday night, I thought that their Saturday pitcher was much better than their Friday pitcher. And I wasn't sure if that was by design or injury or whatever, but if you can remember the days of when David Price was roaming Hawkins Field, that you saw a lot of teams not conceding the Friday night game, but you had a lot of teams that would say, okay, this guy's so dominant that we're going to pitch our 3 on Friday night against David Price and then try to go get a win or two. I'm not saying that happened, but it was interesting to see. I thought the Saturday pitcher was much better. I'm not saying that in any case that, that Drake Fellows is a David Price, but, I'm sure that it came into it as far as matchups, how they matched up against Vanderbilt, and it worked out for them on Saturday.
As far as Vanderbilt, I've been thinking a lot about this. The pitching has been the thing that has had everybody concerned, and rightfully so. I think maybe we've underrated their pitching a little bit. First of all, just they don't give up a lot of hard hit balls. That's kind of Patrick Raby's thing. We tend to think, okay, it's better to have a pitcher who gets ahead and counts and disposes of people efficiently. And I generally believe that, but maybe Pat's style is just different going forward, and it's going to be a high pitch count and those sorts of things, but you don't square them up really well for the most part. I think Hugh Fisher's really come on. Let's talk about him in a second. And finally, I was looking at some midweek results for some SEC teams and how most of them have struggled a little bit here and there and have had some losses that for the most part Vanderbilt has not taken. I think that's where Mason Hickman comes into play. You now put an arm into their weekend postseason mix that they've not had. I think all of a sudden they become a little better team than we've seen on weekends just for that. And if Hugh Fisher continues to pitch the way that he has, and man, he was lights out on Sunday, I see the signs of things starting to come together for them there, Chip.
Well, Chris, it's hard to argue with 19-1, right? I mean, it's you're picking at little things here, trying to find. But I think that what you find with both, Raby and Fellows is the wheels almost come off, and then they come off at different times for both of them. I think with Fellows, it seems to be when on his Friday night starts that it's he gets into early trouble where he gets in some walks and he's got to get through that first or second inning. And Tim Corbin has said that. He said he gets better as the game goes on. With Raby, it tends to come later when the walks tend to mount up for him, and he gives up a few hard hit balls. So that's kind of the situation with those two guys where, again, we're complaining about 19-1 combined record between the two, but an intelligent baseball fan, I think, somebody who's followed pitching and knows pitching, just wants to make sure that those things get ironed out for the postseason. It's great that you have Mason Hickman and experience. I know if I was a pitching coach, I would be fully comfortable with Mason Hickman starting a regional final game, an as needed game on the Hill for my team if I was a pitching coach, because he has the experience. He pitched in the league last year as a three starter. So you're developing and you're seeing consistency between this staff. I think Scott Brown's kind of made a point that if you notice, Zach King did not get an appearance this weekend. He usually was kind of that first guy out of the pen on Friday night. He did not get an appearance this weekend. You also didn't see Eater this weekend. It was pretty much a consistency of having, Hugh Fisher, A.J. Franklin got, an inning and wasn't as good as the Louisville game. And then Hugh Fisher, as you mentioned, pitched really good, 3 innings. But we didn't even need to get to Tyler Brown for the close on Sunday. So I think it's a stable full of consistent guys. I think there's some worry that if you get into a big ball game, and I talked about the wheels falling off, if some team were to get to, for example, Fellows early, and then you start getting into your pen in a regional situation where you'd like for those guys to get that 6 and 7 innings so you can save your pitching staff.
Gamesmanship was an issue this weekend, and I sat in the press box, so there's a lot of things that you hear in the dugouts where you sit that I don't pick up on. There was the trying to break Kumar Rocker's rhythm, those sorts of things. I think some chatter coming from the dugouts. What kind of stuff did you notice from where you sat?
It was that. I mean, that's all part of it. You got to fight through it. I think you listen to the post-game interviews with the couple of the Commodore players. It's just, when I think it was, I'm not sure who the quote that came from, but when you do it and it works, you love it. When the other team does it, you hate it. You can't stand it. And, Kumar Rocker, the one thing I noticed about him from the first time I saw him at Hawkins Field this year is he likes to work quickly. And as an infielder, you love that. It keeps your infielder, outfielder, you love it. It keeps you into the ball game. It keeps the rhythm going. And he's been known for that. So that's pure scouting. That was pure scouting by Missouri that, hey, we're not going to let this kid dictate the pace of the game because that gives him an advantage. And I, you noticed, I've never seen some of the gamesmanship. Missouri was getting signals from the third base coach and there wasn't even a runner on. Come on. But that's going to happen. And I guess there's no rule in place that you can't do that. But it was purely an effort by Missouri to disrupt his rhythm. And, he pitched 6 innings and 6 strong innings. I have nothing wrong with Kumar Rocker's outing. But it did kind of give Saturday just sort of a weird feel to the game. It was the game didn't have any rhythm whatsoever, like the games 1 and 3, and it worked. So again, when it works, when you're on the other side, you don't like it too much.
Is it valid to criticize a pitcher for working too fast from an umpiring or an opponent's perspective? That seems silly to me, but what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, any of the players on the field, the defense likes a quickly called game, quick paced game. So does the umpiring crew. It helps them, standing around and when the standing around is minimal. So, the umpire really, I don't think I've ever seen a situation where you, as an umpire, you can tell that you have to tell the batter, why, get in the box. There's definite rules about, you can't get out of the box and you have to have 1 foot in the box. Now, as kind of like in basketball, when the hand check is called at the beginning of the season, they call it every other play. And then towards the end of the year, they don't. I think you're seeing less and less of that. Vanderbilt's guilty of having guys too that adjust their batting gloves every at bat and do their routine. So everybody has their routines, but I don't think it's anything that, whether you see it down the road, you might see some other teams try to get in Rocker's head a little bit. Now seeing what Missouri did, and people talk, and the games are all on, tape as far as you get them on SEC Network Plus, so those games can be watched. And I will bet you that some other teams will try to do that. Now, how Scott Brown and his workings will be able to get with Kumar Rocker and the pitching staff and the catchers for Vanderbilt to how to combat that. That's another thing. They'll have to have some strategy as far as how to combat that.
Let's talk about Kumar for a minute. I think he may be the most gifted pitcher they've ever had. But to me, that's between he and probably Price and Walker Buehler, and to be determined. But I love him, but there are some things that I've noticed. First of all, the not able to hold runners on. What do you make of that?
Well, he's such a big kid. He's got a big kick and big leg kick, and that's just something that he probably never had to work on growing up because not many people got on base. Think about it. I don't have access to what he did in summer ball, and I don't have access to what he did in high school. But when not many people are getting on, you don't have really an opportunity to hold people on. And I bet you that kid was extremely dominant in high school and in summer league programs. So that's just something he's going to have to work on. You have to vary your looks. You have to maybe mix in a slide step occasionally where you're not using the same look. So I think he's gotten better at that as the years gone by. But you're also talking about a little bit, the sample size of what we saw this weekend. Missouri loves to run, right? Those guys, they're running first move, they're running play steals, they're running from second to third. They're one of the top teams in the SEC and in the country as far as stealing bases, and all 9 of them can steal bases. So I think you saw a little bit of that this weekend. So, but it's just something you got to work on. And he's now, you look at him, he's battle tested. He's 6-5. He's lost 5 games, which is crazy to think that Kumar Rocker is 6-5 on the season. So half of the games that Vanderbilt has lost, Rocker's been the pitcher of record, which is kind of crazy to think.
Yeah, the thing that you pointed out about him probably not having to face a lot of runners, I think is really valid. The thing that bothered me a little bit is he did throw over in one situation and just about bounced it away from Julian Infante. Did not look comfortable. I just wonder if that's a situation where he just does not like throwing to first, and teams are going to really start taking advantage of that.
I didn't really notice that. I noticed in the beginning of the year, he a little bit. It's kind of been off and on with him as far as his comfort level, but nothing I really noticed. It could have been just a situation where the ball got away from him. But those are little things that I'm certain that Scott Brown, now that they're out of school and they've got basically 24/7 baseball, that the pitchers will be able to work on the small, finer things, and that'll be something that they can work with him on the side and get him more comfortable as the postseason comes on.
The other thing about him, and I think this is just a flukish thing, he will set down teams 1, 2, 3 for 2-3 innings in a row, and a lot of times when he doesn't, it's a 4-pitch inning. But he seems like if he gives up a couple of hits, a lot of times they're right in a row, or he'll pitch a 5-batter inning, but both those runners were scored. I think it's kind of a flukish thing. But is there anything to him? Because I don't believe he gets rattled. I think he's really calm, but it does seem like he gives up his runners in clusters. It does seem like he will give up 3 or 4 runners in a row after a long stretch of domination and then maybe return right back to where he was. Do you make anything to him giving up maybe base runners in clusters in the middle of a dominant streak?
I don't think so. I mean, that's just maturity. I mean, a lot of times when you're a young kid and you've thrown hard your whole life and you've been the dominant pitcher and somebody gets a hit off you kind of tend to want to challenge the next guy and blow fastballs by him and more of an anger thing. But you mentioned his demeanor, and I've said this from day one that I saw him, the first time that I saw Kumar Rocker pitch. The ball comes out of the young man's hand differently than I've seen. And a lot of times you talk about players throwing a heavy ball, and it's a hard topic if you don't know anything about baseball, throwing a heavy ball, what that means. It just gets up on you quicker than most. And how the ball travels, he's, of course, a very tall guy. I mean, 6'5", 6'4". So when he's, his stretch as he gets to the plate and releases the ball, that has a lot to do with it too. But the ball just seems to explode out of his hand. But his demeanor, and I've not once seen him change his expression. Now, I've watched him a bunch and watched him on the road and watched him on television when they play, but he just has a calm demeanor about him. That doesn't mean he's not competitive. And I'm sure that, youth, a couple guys get some hits and he wants to sit there and blow the ball by people, and you can't do that in this league. So I agree with you. Thinking back on it, there have been some times where he has been dominant, and then it'll be base hit, walk, and then he'll strike out the side. But that's just having a live arm like he has, and that's one of the things that's been most impressive about him.
Yeah, and I took too long to articulate, but just case in point, on Saturday, he gives up that run in the first inning. He goes 1, 2, 3 in the second. He gives up a 2-out double that wasn't really that hard hit in the third. Otherwise, retires the side in order. Retires him in order in the fourth. Retires him in order in the fifth. Then in the sixth, it is walk, single, hit by pitch, all with 1 out. So I guess that's my point. It just seems like he's been prone to giving those up. Again, I think it's probably a fluke, but when it happens several times in a row, you do start to wonder. Chip, anything else that you noticed this weekend? I've got one. I didn't think the hitting was great. I thought that they got some tough luck at times. I talked about those 2 balls that were hit hard. Blade didn't really hit the ball well. Austin Martin was Austin Martin, but nobody really had a stellar weekend outside of those guys. Again, I credit that to Missouri, but the hitting did get slowed down a bit this week.
Yeah, Blade was 3 for 12. I noticed that a little bit. JJ didn't have a great weekend. He looked like he was struggling a little bit on some breaking balls, and they had some lefties that were giving him some trouble. He 3 for 12 when you is not horrendous, but I think in JJ Blade numbers, that was something that kind of stood out a little bit. Austin Martin was 6 for 13, and that's including a game on Saturday where he was 0 for 4 in the loss, the 5-2 loss, and he ends up 6 for 13, and that stood out to me. You wonder, Cooper Davis not playing and not even playing this week at all after getting a pinch hit in Columbia. What's the situation there? If they're just letting him just heal some more, and you wonder if he's going to get any at-bats. You kind of want, if he's going to be coming back, like to get him some work this week in Lexington, but you don't want to push it. I mean, this team has had some injuries, but we've mentioned this before. They haven't had the, J.J. Bleday, Cooper Davis, Austin Martin all in a row being all out at the same time. There have been one here and one there, and there haven't been multiple players. And that's where the depth has come into play, that you have players who can just be inserted in the lineup and there's really no drop-off. So knocking on wood, they staying healthy is going to be key here as they finish off these last 4 games and see how they do against Kentucky. Kentucky's really got nothing to play for other than trying to make the tournament. So you got to feel good about your chances, but they're not going to lay down for you. It's an SEC game too. So, those things, I think Cooper Davis not getting that bat is kind of interesting. Reason why we don't know. Like I mentioned, Bleday being, 3 for 12, not a great week for him, but I think he'll bounce back. And I think the other interesting thing coming out of the weekend probably, and I mentioned this earlier, is you're starting to see this team get in a routine as far as who Scott Brown and Tim Corbin won the pitching ranks. You didn't see Zach King at all this weekend. You wonder if he'll get some work tomorrow night or Tuesday night against Middle and how that works. But, this time of year, you want to get your rotation going. You want to get your players and who's going to pinch run, who's going to be the guy who's going to bunt for you, who's going to be the first guy out of the pen, all your things you're wanting to head towards Hoover and then the regionals and super regionals and hopefully Omaha.
Well, and you didn't see this weekend those guys, but you did see a couple guys we talked about in Franklin and Smith. I'm going back and looking. Franklin pitched a third of an inning, gave up a run, 3 hits, only retired one of the 4 batters he faced. But really, that was not him pitching terribly. I'm not going to say he was great, but that was some seeing eye singles or bunts or things like that, and not getting help from the defense. Ethan Smith was really good, did give up a home run, but otherwise didn't give up a lot, gave up 1 run in 2 2/3 innings. So there was the guys that, besides Fisher, that pitched a little bit. The box score might not have shown it, but I thought they pitched pretty well.
Right. I mean, Fisher, Fisher goes out there twice, as we mentioned, 1 inning on Friday night, and he throws 3 on Sunday. So I thought that was interesting that he gave him the ball, and I thought it was good to let him go the full 3 innings instead of having to hand the ball off to Tyler Brown. I mean, Tyler Brown pitched against Louisville and had a good outing, impressive there, and did his job, and then got an outing, 1 inning in the 5-2 win. So I think that AJ Franklin pitched really well at Louisville. Comes in, and the first pitch he throws was drilled into right field in the game in the 5-2 loss, and wasn't as sharp as he was against Louisville. But that's a situation where they put the kid back out there who pitched really well 3 days before and given him an opportunity to try to get that slot of maybe what Zach King was pitching in, and trying to give him some confidence and some consecutive outings back to back where he can feel good about himself and through the postseason. But I feel really good about, the way Hugh Fisher threw. I was impressed with him. Tyler Brown was consistent. I mean, Tyler Brown has been consistent throughout the whole season, except for that one outing against Arkansas when the wheels fell off. But other than that, I thought he's been Mr. Consistency. And, the pitching staff as a whole, I thought did really, really well, for what they did, and we'll see how they, it'll be interesting to see, I think, Chris, what they do with Mason Hickman this week in general, with Thursday's game. I know Mason Hickman was warming up in the pen yesterday. That was in the importance of that game. You got to get that win and get the series win. And the fact that he was warming up, potentially going the game, said something. So, does he pitch tomorrow night against Middle? Does he get held back, perhaps to see what he could do this weekend against SEC competition? That's a decision that's going to have to be made. Do you pitch a Zach King against Middle and you try to get some guys some work and kind of piece together Tuesday night against Middle and see how that works and get some guys some innings? That will be the decision that will be interesting to follow.
Yes, it will. I think that if you could get an early lead, maybe get him a couple innings, get him out of the ball game, give some other guys a shot, maybe let Ethan Smith go a little bit. I think that would be an ideal plan. But let's talk Kentucky. I think the concern, and of course, Vanderbilt controls its own destiny, sweeps the series and it wins the conference outright no matter what anybody else does. If it goes 2-1, then it wins at least a share of the title and it will get the number one seed in the SEC tournament regardless because it will win the tiebreaker. I think the concern is you got to face Zach Thompson, and he's been dominant. He is getting buzz as a middle of the first round guy next month. He has pitched 84 innings, struck out 121 guys.
Right. I mean, Kentucky, this has been an unusual. They've got a new stadium that they're playing in, and there was a lot of excitement building for this team, and it's been a big time disappointment. But in the game that Thompson pitched, he struck out 11 against Arkansas. And he pitched 6 in the third. So the kid can throw. Now, looking at this, it looks like he threw on Saturday, Chris. I'm thinking of Friday night they pitched like 7 pitchers. You're talking about, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but that guy's as good as advertised, and that they're not going to lay down for anybody. I mean, he's, as you mentioned, he's a quality arm that is going to give any team fits in this league. So it will be interesting to see how this plays out. And when you mentioned the tiebreaker, so Georgia would have the tiebreaker against us, right? I mean, you're talking Arkansas, Vanderbilt has a tiebreaker, but Georgia, if some way they worked it in and tied, they would have the tiebreaker. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, so I know there's some different scenarios, but games on Thursday, which has happened I think 3 times this year. It shouldn't be a change for this team. All the games this weekend, by the way, are on Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Give a little extra rest for the tournament. So, if you're Kentucky, you're playing for a little pride here. You have 0 chance of making the NCAA tournament. The only way you can make it is if you make the tournament, make the SEC tournament and win the thing. So you have to wonder if some of those guys, last series and possibly check out. That there's always a fear if you're Kentucky staff about that. But I guarantee you the Thompson's game will be a battle, and it'll be good for Vanderbilt to see a pitcher like this. I mean, it's a quality arm that you would see in a regional, super regional type, and it's good that they're going to be facing him.
You're right. They have been using him on Sunday, so I don't know why. I don't know why you would save a guy like that to game 3 when your bullpen's not very good, but that's the case. But anyway, Vanderbilt can control its own destiny and at least have the title wrapped up by the time, at least a share of it wrapped up by the time it gets there. So I guess that's the good news.
Yeah, and make no bones about it. I mean, regular season SEC title is an accomplishment in this league, and I guarantee you, as much as these guys know, they can read, they can look on they see the standings, and while Tim Corbin and they talk about getting to the middle after every game, which is a great philosophy, and not getting too high and too low. You get hardware for that at the SEC tournament. The commissioner, they make a deal out of it. They bring the regular season trophy to you. And while it doesn't get you anything, it doesn't get you anything tremendous as far as other than a trophy that you put in your trophy case. There's something to be said about that in this league, and I think it's something to play for. And it gives them. I almost think it's better that they have to know that they're playing for this. They're playing for this opportunity, and not having sealed it up a couple weeks ago, where they know that if they don't play their best baseball, that could escape them, and someone like Arkansas could, slip under behind them, or Georgia. So I think it's a good scenario for them. But it's definitely a goal that I would use as a coach. Let's go, let's win this thing outright, win the regular season title, and give it a little momentum into Hoover.
Well, by the way, Georgia can only get the tiebreaker against them if Vanderbilt loses 2 this weekend and Georgia sweeps. So it's unlikely, but it could happen. Speaking of which, I was sort of predicting the weekend series. Let's see, we've got a lot of interesting ones. I had Missouri sweeping Florida in Missouri. Again, I think you have to factor in the plant. One that's interesting will be Ole Miss going to Tennessee. I don't like the way the Vols are finishing the season. I've got Ole Miss winning that one a couple games to 1. I've got Vandy sweeping Kentucky and Lexington. I've got Arkansas winning 2 or 3 at A&M. And Mississippi State's got South Carolina at home, which I think it will sweep. So if things go the way that I think they'll go, here are your seeds. You've got Vandy 1, Arkansas 2, Mississippi State 3, and Georgia 4. Here would be your matchups. You would have, if things go according to the way that I've got them going, you'd have 11-6 LSU playing the opening game of the tournament, facing 3-seed MSU with the winner of that one the next day. You've got Tennessee and Missouri in a dandy of a 7-10 game. The winner gets number 2 Arkansas the next day. You've got Vanderbilt facing the winner of Auburn and Texas A&M, and you've got whoever comes out of a 3-team tie between Alabama, Kentucky, and South Carolina facing Ole Miss in that 12-5 game with the winner facing Georgia. I think Alabama's the best team of that bunch and probably the team that I would least want to see there if I'm Mississippi State. If things go according to form, that's how I have the bracket shaping up, Chip.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting tournament in Hoover and how teams play it. We talk about it every year is how some teams don't want to be there. Some teams could care less. You couldn't care less. You've got teams that want to save their staff and wouldn't dare throw a pitcher until it's their turn in the lineup. And we'll have to just see how that works this year with the teams that make it. The thing that I notice about this final weekend is the schedule is not lining up for the teams that are in trouble. And meaning, as you mentioned, Florida having to go to Missouri. Florida is an anomaly, being 10-17 in the conference. That's something you're not used to. And you got Kentucky having to face a Vanderbilt team that's one of the top teams, 1-2 teams in the country. It doesn't line up. Tennessee has to play a team that Ole Miss, although they're hosting them, Ole Miss has the potential to put it in your schedule as far as getting a couple wins from you. So it's not going to be an easy task also for that group of Kentucky, Alabama, and South Carolina, both with the same 7-20 record, and they're fighting for 2 spots. So 3 teams fighting for 2 spots. So you think Alabama's going to come out of that? As far as
I would have to look at the tiebreaker. I just think they're the best team. When I've seen them play, I think that they've got a little bit more available in the bullpen. They played better in the midweek, which is usually a pretty good indicator of pitching depth. I don't know that they'll win it, but I just think – and who have they got? Have they got Georgia this weekend?
Yes.
I think that's who it is. I don't know that that's a slam dunk for Georgia, but the thing is the top 4 seeds are almost set barring something really crazy because – I don't think Alabama will be easy, but compared to what you could have, I think you'll take that if you're Georgia. Basically, if any of these top 4 teams, Vandy, Arkansas, Mississippi State, and Georgia, just win one game, well, Vandy's already clinched the first day bye, and so is Arkansas. But all Mississippi State has to do is win 1 of 3 at home against South Carolina. All Georgia has to do is win 1 of 3 against Alabama. Those teams get those first day byes.
Yeah, and let's do this real fast. You're very much well versed in the RPI, and who do you think, looking at the standings and where they are, who do you think's in trouble, and who do you think? I mean, let's be obvious: Vanderbilt, Georgia, Arkansas, Mississippi State, and I would think Ole Miss and LSU are in. Now that group of Missouri, Tennessee. We're going to take South Carolina, Kentucky, and Alabama off. Let's talk Auburn, Texas A&M, Tennessee, and Missouri. Do you think who's out and who's in and who needs a lot of help?
That is a really interesting discussion. Let me just go from the top. Vanderbilt's got a national seed locked up. Arkansas, Mississippi State, Georgia, probably just one win for any of those teams, and they each get 1 too. Arkansas may already be there. Ole Miss, that Tennessee series is fascinating because if Ole Miss can go and win that series in Knoxville, it's got a chance to host. It might be a little tough, but I think they could. LSU was interesting because it closes with Auburn. LSU's pitching has been wretched at times, but Auburn, the injuries have just decimated that staff. If LSU wins 2 out of 3, I think they will probably host. A&M Arkansas is the one that I'm really watching. Because A&M pitches really well, has trouble scoring runs, but if A&M gets a couple from Arkansas, the RPI right now is at 13. It's going to make A&M go up in the RPI. At that point, say you take the series 2 games to 1, then you are 16, 13, and 1 with the top maybe 10 RPI at that point in that record in the SEC. They're probably hosting. Missouri, if it can sweep Florida, already a 14 RPI. Florida's 33 in the RPI. Missouri's RPI is probably going to take a little bit of a positive bump. Man, that's crazy, but you could potentially have 4 national seeds, 4 other teams that have a good shot to host. Now, I think the NCAA may say we're not going to let 8 teams host and maybe whittles that down by 1 or maybe 2, but you have 4 more teams in the discussion there. Auburn, I think if Auburn can take a game off LSU at 14 and 16, they're going to get into the NCAAs. And I think if Tennessee beats Ole Miss, Tennessee is going to get in. If Tennessee just takes a game from Ole Miss, 13 and 17, but an RPI of 10 right now, that's probably not going to drop much further. I think the Vols have a really good case to get in based on a sweep of Indiana, which is a lot of people's darling as a 2 seed. Beat Fresno State 2 out of 3. Now, I think Florida is done. Alabama, South Carolina, Kentucky. So really, you're probably looking at 8 or really, 10 teams, I think, to have a good argument, unless one of those teams just gets swept.
Well, Tennessee is just going to be an interesting one to watch, and I plan to follow that this week. You're looking at 12 and 15 with, as you mentioned, the RPI Boys World RPI of 10. And, the precedent has been set. What you don't want to do is just like in basketball, you do not want to give the committee a reason to keep you out. And if you remember, Chris, Kentucky was right in the slot that Tennessee went, and they went one and done in Hoover, and they didn't make the SEC tournament. Was that last year or the year before? I'm not sure, but you give them a reason. The reason is you didn't have a 500 record in the conference, and you went one and done in your conference tournament. So I think Tennessee's the one that's sitting. It's going to be an interesting week in Knoxville because they're going to need to win 2 games minimum. And I really think they need to win a game in the tournament. I don't think I would be. It's just fun. I know their RPI is high, but the precedent has been set. You can give the committee an opportunity to say, you know what, I know your league's competitive. We've always known the SEC league's competitive, but we've got, some darling team that had, wins a conference tournament that wasn't, these bubble bursters we talk about. And that's what you got to worry about if you're a UT fan. So there's some coming down the wire here. There's some interesting games this weekend. It's going to decide a lot. And I would hope to think that the NCAA would take into fact the conference tournament as much as they can for some of these teams on the bubble, because I think it matters. I think it matters of how they're playing going down the stretch. And if the games are going to count, which they do, you got to give some credence to how a team does in the tournament.
Well, it's crazy because you've got these teams in the middle, like I could see Ole Miss hosting, or if it gets swept, maybe dropping to a high 3 or low 2. LSU could host if it sweeps this weekend. LSU could also get swept and end up 15 and 15. Some bad midweek losses. I don't think they're going to leave LSU out of the tournament. But it gets dicier for them. I mean, I think they'd still be a 2, but there's a big range of outcomes. Missouri and A&M really have a huge range of outcomes because both those teams have really good RPIs, but they're sitting there. A&M is 14-12-1. Missouri is 13-13-1. You win 3 games, and all of a sudden you're looking at a host, but you lose 3, and all of a sudden you're below 500 in the SEC, which always puts you with a little bit of mercy. Now, I think those teams are probably going to come up on the right side because of those RPIs that are strong already. But Tennessee is the weird one with the 10 RPI, but it's 12 and 15 in the league. It gets swept by Ole Miss. I don't think the Vols, even though the RPI won't tumble much, probably get in the tournament. So I think it's a fascinating weekend for the league as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, and don't also ignore the fact that the NCAA likes butts and seats. I mean, Oxford and Baton Rouge would get 13,000 a game, and not there'd be sold out sessions, 13,000. Now, maybe there wouldn't be 13,000 in the seats for the game where it's, the middle game where it's not Ole Miss or LSU, but don't think that doesn't come into consideration when you got 2 sites that the NCAA would be drooling over to have. It's just economics. Having stadiums where they come out for those games, and they've proven at Swayze Field and the Box and LSU and Baton Rouge. Those are 2 places that consistently have huge crowds.
Chip, thanks for joining us today. You've got a great real estate business. Now is the time to start thinking about getting your home on the market or about buying a home with school almost out. Tell us more about what you guys do.
Sure, Chris. Frederick and Clark Realty is our family firm, and we've been around for over 60 years, and the real estate market is still on the hot side. Case in point, I had a friend of mine who put his house on the market this weekend with our company. They had 6 offers on the first day, and it was an overbid situation on a nice home in Green Hills, and he's closing in about 2 weeks. So you're still seeing that type of situation when houses are priced right. And doesn't matter what zip code, you're seeing houses move. Now, the market has slowed overall, and in a sense, it's not like that everywhere, but in the right pockets of Nashville, things are really, really hot. So it is a good time. The school's coming to a close here. People are putting their homes on the market if they haven't already. Still a seller's market somewhat. So if you're interested in selling your home or on the buy side, if you're looking to move to Nashville or looking to change neighborhoods, give our real estate company a call at 615-327-4800 and check our website out. Chris, our website is designed, has been retooled, that we have the ability for those who visit to search neighborhoods and zip codes and see what's out there. You can get reminders and email reminders and alerts as far as if a home pops in a certain area that you are interested in. So check that out. That's at frederickandclark.com. And again, our phone number is 615-327-4800.
Thanks for joining us, Chip.
Thanks, Chris. Have a great week.
You too. He's Chip Fridrich. I'm Chris Lee. Thank you for listening to the Vandy Sports Podcast. We will have several more of these coming later in the week.